17 years old, you finally saved up enough money for your own car. Do you buy that beat up Civic that's been around for a couple years? You're that muscle of a Mustang. No, it's probably something that should have been sent to the scrapyard tens of years ago. But your choice doesn't matter, because it has a manual transmission. And suddenly, every drive feels important. It feels like you're in complete control of the vehicle. You aren't just steering your car, you're working with it. Every shift feels like a milestone. Every smooth downshift feels like a small victory. Every missed gear, well, it's a lesson to not do that shit again. For decades, that was the driving experience that everyone grew up having. No matter when you learned how to drive a manual. That was considered the purest way to drive. But today it's disappearing. Tomorrow, go up to a dealership. Ask them what they have. Try finding a manual transmission. You're not gonna find one because it's like searching for a dinosaur. But what actually happened to the manual transmission? Did drivers just stop caring? Did automatics just simply get better? Or was the manual just straight up doomed from the start? That's what I'm here to answer. Today we're diving into the rise, the fall, and possible future of the manual transmission. But the answer is, well, a little more complicated than you might think. But to understand why manuals are disappearing, we need to look into why they dominated for so long. For most of automotive history, manual transmissions weren't just the enthusiast option, they were, frankly, the only option you had. Don't get me wrong, automatic transmissions existed, but they were heavy, expensive, complicated, and often unreliable. Throughout the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s, many cars were still sold primarily with manual gearboxes. Now for this, there were several reasons why. First off, manuals were just cheaper to manufacture than automatics. You had less parts to worry about, less stuff to program in the car. You just had less to deal with in the manufacturing side of manual transmissions. Manuals compared to automatics were so much more reliable at the time. You didn't have to worry about your gearbox failing. You didn't have to worry about it automatically missing a gear. If you did it, well, you just sucked. Also, at the time, manuals delivered way better fuel economy than automatics. And finally, drivers were just simply expected to learn how to drive a manual. For generations, driving manual wasn't just considered a special skill. It was part of learning how to drive, just like using your blinker or turning on your headlights. By 1980s and the 90s, manuals had been deeply rooted into car culture. Movies, racing, and tuner culture all reinforced the idea that if you were a real driver, you didn't drive an automatic, you drove a manual. If you wanted to be fast, you drove a stick. If you wanted maximum control, guess what? You bought a stick. If you wanted respect from other enthusiasts and your parents, guess what? You drove a damn stick. Now, for decades up to this time, automatics had a reputation. They were slower, less efficient, less engaging, and to be honest, they were kind of boring. But just like today, technology doesn't stand still. Now, let me ask you this. When do you think the first reliable automatic was mass produced? Was it the 90s? 80s? Maybe the 60s? Well, if you guessed any of those, you were wrong, and no, it's not the 70s. The 1940 Oldsmobile was the first reliable mass-produced automatic transmission. The 40s had reliable automatics. We were doomed from the 40s. But this wasn't like the automatic we have now. This was a new concept that General Motors had been working on for years to perfect and finally did it in the Oldsmobile. They called it the Hydromatic. It was hydraulic fluid and planetary gear set to automatically shift based on the speed you were going and the throttle pressure you were applying on the pedal. But this didn't kick off the automatic takeover. They still really didn't gain any traction till the end of the century. Because by the late 1990s and early 2000s, manufacturers began pouring enormous resources into developing these automatic transmissions that can one day take over manuals, and we saw what happened when they did that. This is when computers started becoming more and more powerful. It could do more and more stuff. So that just helped transmission programming improve faster and faster. Not only did this drastically change how people were looking at manuals and how they were produced, but it completely changed the gear count. 5-speed became 6 speeds, 6 became 8, 8 became 10. Then became what we have now is the dual clutch transmissions. And suddenly something happened that nobody could have ever expected 10 years prior. Now think about that for a second. For almost a century, manual transmissions represented peak performance, peak speed, peak car culture. Then engineers created machines that could shift faster than any human could have ever imagined. Yes, a skilled driver might be able to shift from second to third in half a second, but modern dual clutch systems can do it in just milliseconds like that. This completely changed the conversation of manual versus automatic. The question stopped becoming, why would you buy an automatic? They're stupid, to why would you buy a manual? That's too much work. This is not only speculated, but is the direct cause why manuals just started disappearing overnight. Now we all know performance numbers is what really sells cars. Manufacturers love posting acceleration numbers. They love that 0 to 60 rate, and automatics became better at producing those. Imagine you're a car company. You just built 2 different versions of the same sports car. Same car, just one's an automatic and one's a manual. One goes 0 to 60 in 4.2, while the other goes 0 to 60 in 3.8. Which one would you advertise? Exactly, the 3.8. And now, that had become the automatic. Every hardcore enthusiast started accepting automatic transmissions because, well, they started delivering results. And when we look at the data, supercars were the first casualties in the automatic takeover. Now you might be thinking, Hutch, how did supercars be the first to go? Well, Ferrari gradually abandoned manuals and Lamborghini followed. And after Lamborghini just came McLaren, and once McLaren did it, pretty much everyone else did it. Eventually these manual transmissions that we all saw as the peak performance of any car just disappeared from most of these exotic performance cars that a lot of people had heavily sought after. The market had spoken. Speed became more important than tradition. Now, a common argument you'll hear about this is, well, drivers just got lazy, but it's not really fair. Think about how driving has changed over the years. You're going to work, commutes are longer, traffic's heavier, cities are more congested than they've ever been. Imagine spending 2 hours every day creeping forward in stop and go traffic. An automatic transmission, you don't feel it. But a manual, they start to feel less romantic. Clutch, brake, clutch, brake, clutch, brake. Repeat for an hour, 2 hours. Depending on where you are, 3 hours. For this, many drivers just wanted convenience. They didn't want to look cool, they didn't want to impress their friends anymore, they just wanted to get to work without having whiplash. Honestly, we can't really blame them. Most people don't buy cars for fun. They buy cars for practicality, to go to work, take their kids to school, run errands. For those drivers, automatics just simply make more sense than a manual ever could. One of the biggest advantage manuals had was the fuel economy. For years, manual transmissions reliably gave better miles per gallon than automatics ever could. But now that advantage is gone. Modern automatics are incredibly efficient, more efficient than they've ever been, and they're only gonna get more efficient. If 3% of drivers are preferring the manual option, is it worth spending and pouring millions of dollars into development and supporting this transmission that 3% of the population is buying? That's why so many options for manuals disappeared overnight. The demand just dropped and wasn't there anymore. Today we have more of a problem for manuals, and that's the electric cars. If they weren't already struggling with automatics, then electric could deliver the knockout punch. Electric motors produce instant torque. They don't need traditional gearboxes, and most EVs operate on just a single speed transmission. No clutch, no shifting, no gears. There's two sides to EVs. There's the ones that love them and the ones that hate them. But one thing is undeniable, and both sides have to agree. Their rise makes manual transmissions even less relevant. An entire generation of drivers may grow up never learning how to drive a manual or never even knowing they exist. For enthusiasts like you and me, that's just a difficult reality to accept. Now, despite everything we've talked about, manuals just refuse to die. Because driving isn't always about efficiency. For some people, it's about emotion. Nobody drives a 68 Mustang because it's practical. Nobody buys a 72 Firebird because it's convenient. People buy these cars because they feel something. Manual transmissions create this involvement that automatics never will and never can. They force you to participate. They're one of, if not the last, remaining direct connection between driver and machine. In a world increasingly becoming more dominated by automatics and now EVs, that connection is going to matter. This is why in recent years, manuals are coming back. You got people buying Miatas, WRXs, Honda's making the Type R. Enthusiasts were willing to pay extra for engagement. Now companies are making that new because there's a generation coming up that could bring back the manual transmission. And there's one reason why. Fun still matters. If you want to have fun driving a car, you drive a manual. So what's really killing the manual transmission? It's not just one thing. It's technology, convenience, traffic, fuel economy, performance, and now the electrification of cars. The manual transmission wasn't destroyed by a single supervillain. It was gradually replaced by cars that were just simply better at accomplishing the tasks the majority of drivers cared about. But there's one thing we need to take into consideration. Being better isn't always more enjoyable. And that's why manuals continue to survive. Not because they're the fastest, not because they're the most reliable, but because they're enjoyable to drive. What was the first manual you ever drove? In 10 years, do you think manuals will still exist? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, like. We're up here twice a week. See you in the next one. Peace.